Michael Hogan, you and I, it's creepy looking at our predictions, have almost the exact same predictions down to the rankings for Best Picture. And that's remarkable because there's one category we don't agree on, and you're going out on this limb for Reese Witherspoon for Best Actress. Explain. What don't I know and you know?
Oh, boy, I don't know. First of all, I have to tell you, I didn't realize we were lined up that way, and I swear I'm not copying your pick.
I swear, too. Same here.
Even though that wouldn't be the worst idea. You know, I just think that I really liked Wild a lot, and I think that Reese is not only a great actress, but a person who, what she's doing in this kind of phase 2, you might call it, of her career, seeking out projects, actually, you know, producing the movies, telling stories of women who have something to say, and you know, it's not just a story about like a love affair or something. I just admire it. I have a feeling other people might admire it too, and so I just don't want to be the same as everybody else on everything. And this is one where even if I'm wrong, I feel strongly enough like I can. I feel good about the decision and the vote. And, you know, sometimes we're trying to just figure out what's going to happen, and sometimes we're trying to say, hey, I would like it if this did happen. I think Reese is it's just a cool movie. I feel like it's been overlooked a little bit. So I know several women who think that, you know, girl movies don't get as much, critical attention or awards attention as boy movies. And so I hope that this movie does connect with an audience because I'm a boy and I liked it very much. And then the other issue that I have is I haven't seen Still Alice, so that's going to be the obvious other issue that I have.
Okay, because that's, of course, a girl movie. It's from her perspective, and that's rare this year. We don't have very many like that. So I was thinking, too, that we may be underestimating Wild because there are 30% of the Academy demographic are females, even though it's this old boys club. And since we have a preferential ballot ranking system, we could see a really fine movie like Wild do well. But here's where I disagree with you, Mike.
Okay, good.
You're not voting on the performances. Come on. I mean, stop thinking like a truist here. Stop thinking, you know, with this kind of noble aim of we're really in pursuit of the best of anything. You know, the example I like to ridicule the most is, and nobody on the planet, including Jean Dujardin's mother, thought he gave the best performance of the year in The Artist, right? Certainly The Hours, I would say, is not Nicole Kidman's greatest performance, but she had just rebounded from the breakup with Tom Cruise, and Hollywood wanted to give her a hug. The problem in the case of Reese Witherspoon isn't the fact that she's won before. That Sally Field has reminded us when they like you, they really, really like you. They'll give you two, etc. I think the problem with Reese Witherspoon is she's playing herself. And if we've seen a trend in the last couple of years, Tom Hanks wasn't nominated last year because he played himself in Captain Phillips. Even after he got a SAG nomination, Golden Globe nomination, Critics' Choice nomination, he was snubbed by the Academy. Robert Redford was snubbed last year, too. And I think lately we're seeing a real snobism factor at the Oscars where they want you to be Meryl Streep becoming Maggie Thatcher. You know, they want to see the transformation. And if you're going to play yourself like Julianne Moore, at least transform into a handicap. Is that too cynical?
No, I think that does make sense. That's an issue. I would argue that Reese isn't playing herself in the sense that she's playing, you know, yes, she's playing a type that's similar to herself. There's also this whole kind of dark descent into drug abuse. She's, you know, probably a bit saltier than the real Reese, although Reese is pretty tough and salty and Southern and, you know, all the rest of it. So, and then as far as, you know, notice neither of us has said actually anything about the performance. I was just picking my narrative,
right.
Which is that people might admire Reese because, you know, as a female, she's going out, as a woman, she's going out and finding projects and taking control of her own narrative rather than waiting for something to come along, and some people might admire that. But yeah, I think that's a totally valid point. So are you picking Julianne then?
Yes, the movie's better than its reputation, by the way. It's I was surprised that it's actually okay. It's a Lifetime movie, but it's a good Lifetime movie.
Yeah. I buy that. And then, you know, Rosamund Pike, I think that's, she's, you know, she'll be happy to be nominated. And then the person I'm really pulling for, my 100-to-1 pick, is Emily Blunt. But I really did think she was kind of great in Into the Woods. And I was hoping that she would I figured she'd get the Golden Globe nomination, musical and comedy, and that could somehow give her a path to Oscars. You know, it's still very unlikely, but that's my other. This is my category. I'm just doing a lot of wishful thinking, and I don't have Jen Aniston in there, but you know, she's had a hell of a week last week, so maybe she'll make it in.
Yeah, and of course she faces that same problem though of playing herself. Now she is scarred. You know, they love it when you de-glam if you're a glamorous star. And in this movie, she's a victim of a car accident, so you see literally all these facial scars on her, but they're not that pronounced. You really have to call it to the viewer's attention before they even notice those things. But yeah, she's very smart. She hired Lisa Tayback as her awards consultant, and even though this movie has no major distribution, if you have a smart campaign, you can still break into the race. And of course, Aniston's trying to send a message. I'm a serious actress. I did make the transition from TV to film, but she did it on the rom-com side. She hasn't yet established herself as a serious thespian, right?
Yeah, and I think she and Jake Gyllenhaal are the two examples of people who probably had more faith in themselves than anybody involved in those projects really had. That these could be awards considered, and so I think that's why both of those nominations kind of crept up on a lot of people at the SAGs and then at the Globes. And it's kind of cool to see, again, just keeping with my self-determination theme that I started with Reese. It's kind of cool to see Jennifer say, no, I'm going to hire Lisa. And I don't know if you know Blad Norman, who used to work with Weinstein, but he reached out to me about Cake, having left Weinstein. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I always think of this like Weinstein diaspora. And when you hear from Cynthia or Tony or Blad, you got to think, all right, this person's serious. They want it. So I think Jen wants it. I think Jake wants it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them.
We're talking about Oscar consultants here. Cynthia Swartz, who used to be with Harvey Weinstein, and Cynthia Swartz and Lisa Tayback, who was most recently ex-Weinstein, generally are against each other and fighting at the Oscars. But this year, both of them have, Lisa has subcontracted Cynthia and Mike Kupferberg. So they're actually both pushing. Lisa's the senior consultant on this. And look, I know it sounds cynical if you're watching this or listening to us to say it's all about the Oscar consultants, but it is. Crash won Best Picture because Cynthia Swartz rammed it through.
Well, they know how to play the game, and a lot of it is retail politicking, a lot of it is framing and figuring out. I'm not going to name names, but one of these folks told me that they thought Boyhood was going to have a hard time because other directors would look at it and say, hey, he had 12 years to make a movie. I only get 8 weeks. Why should he get Best Director? Totally an insane thing to say, but that's the type of, they're testing it out. Let's see if it works. So that's the type of framing that happens. And some of that stuff gets traction. It gets under people's skin. We saw it with Zero Dark 30 for sure, and we'll see it again this year probably.
Last time I saw you in the flesh, we were at the Metropolitan Club a few weeks ago in New York for an event for Unbroken, and Angelina was there, and Jack O'Connell was there, and it was quite a crowd in a very fancy space. The luncheon was very impressive. I'm sure you would agree that they did the Q&A after the lunch. It was very, very lively and fun. And then after the thing was over, Mike, this is so funny. A member of the music branch, who I will not name, but I've known for 30 years, came up to me and goes, I didn't like this movie at all. I wasn't going to vote for this movie. But you know what? She really charmed me today. I'm going to vote for Unbroken. I'm not sure in what case. And that was a classic, perfect example of how effective the campaign is. He was admitting to me, a journalist who covers this, so I could actually be, in turn, blabbing it to you, which is what I'm doing right now in the world, that he was that easily swayed by her charm, which has nothing to do with this movie, of course, or with the Oscars.
No, it's absolutely retail politics. That's why she's there. Angelina doesn't show up to too many luncheons full of sniveling reporters and strange industry veterans that no one's heard from for 20 years. But she was there. There were a lot of big celebrities there that obviously came out to see her, or pretty big media celebrities. That on my favorite table was Gayle King and Ariana Huffington and Joanna Coles. I mean, those are like my power crush ladies. They were all there to see Angelina. And the other thing that I think is interesting is, she had a very tough week last week with SAGs and Globes, but that was before these emails came out with Scott Rudin and Amy Pascal really treating her, especially Scott Rudin, pretty shabby treatment for Angelina, and I think, you know, whatever the truth is about all that stuff, and whatever emails we didn't get to see of Angelina forwarding to her team saying, you know, look at these two, she came off as a class act in those emails as compared to Amy and Scott, and I have a feeling that that will also build some sympathy for her and may change this up. You know, Unbroken is not my favorite movie, and you know, even at the beginning, before any of the rest of it happened, I found it funny that people kept saying, well, she did a good job, like, you know. But I do think that people grade an A-list movie star on a bit of a curve in terms of direction, and in a weird way, the Oscars might enjoy correcting the record for the Globes, kind of the way that they did with Argo, if I'm not mistaking it correctly, if I'm not remembering it wrong.
Well, what happened to Unbroken, in your opinion, Mike? I mean, here's a case of where it looked like the perfect made-for-Oscar movie, right? It's got the heroic character. It's got that kind of Schindler's List ending to it. We all would love to see another woman win, certainly get nominated for director, and then even win. And Angelina is the celebrity-turned-director. There's a fondness for that historically at the Globes. And speaking of Oscar consultants, our buddy Tony Angelotti, also ex-Weinstein,
Yep.
Is doing that now that he's over with Universal. But then when we saw the movie, which was still okay, it was a fine movie, what went wrong?
I think, you know, I think that my sense is that there was maybe a little too much hype coming out of CinemaCon, that there was too much of an idea that this movie is going to be amazing because they held it off for a while. There was a lot of sort of, well, just wait for Unbroken to come and break this whole thing wide open, and then, you know, when you see the movie, it's just not that kind of movie. It's actually a very, very dark film. It doesn't have really quite the inspirational, I think, paces that you look for in a more traditional. It's not a traditional 3-act movie about overcoming odds, even though the entire movie is about overcoming. It's more about just enduring horrific, extended agony. And, you know, you don't walk out of there walking on air by any means. So I think that's one of the problems, and I think there were just inflated expectations was another problem. There was a lot of rumbling about the you know, the fact that it had to be re-edited, and from what I've heard from people at Universal, like, yes, that's true, but so did Life of Pi, so have a lot of movies. You know, it's not unusual for that to happen. So, you know, I think the movie didn't come in as a slam dunk, and there wasn't enough time for anybody to really think about it as anything other than that. There was a sort of like initial, this isn't what I expected, and then it was time to vote for Globes and SAG. So it may be the kind of thing that wears a little better. It may be that some of this, you know, Sony stuff may generate some sympathy for Angelina, and it may be that Oscars think, hey, you know, let's give her some credit after all. It's almost, and arguably maybe, I'm going to spin out a completely dubious theory that I just thought of. But, you know, if Angelina had been nominated for the Golden Globe for direction, it would have been very easy to say, oh, those Globes voters, they love a celebrity. You know, all they did was want her to be there because she's famous. And now that she didn't get it, it kind of gives Oscar voters maybe a reason to think twice about it and say, well, actually, did they make a mistake? Can we correct it? Just a thought.
That's interesting. You and I are on the same team for Best Actor. We both think that Eddie Redmayne's going to win there, but this is the closest race of the big races at Gold Derby's Prediction Center. 11 experts among our team say it's going to be Eddie. 11 say it's Keaton. Keaton had been way out front early on, and now it is actually tied. You go first. Why Eddie?
Well, you know, much more of an inspirational role, much more obviously the kind of role where, you know, he takes on a hardship, as to quote you earlier, a handicap. He is a very, very likable guy. He has been absolutely around, shaking hands, smiling. He's just a lovely guy to be in a room with. And, you know, it's not a perfect film by any means, but it's one of the few sort of traditional 3-act Hollywood-style movies. Oddly, the Hollywood-style movies this year are both British. Imitation Game in this one.
That's right.
And so I see a lot of reason for Eddie Redmayne to win. I think there are some issues that he's going to have to face. At some point, Weinstein is going to press deploy on the missile that reminds everybody that Benedict Cumberbatch played this role 10 years ago. I mean, I know that they are acting like they don't want to, but they have to at some point, or someone's going to do it. It's out there, but I don't think a lot of people are thinking about that. And, you know, the other thing is that I think critics and bloggers didn't love Boyhood as much as it seems so far SAG and Globes voters did. I don't know how much that was Hollywood Foreign Press liking a kind of a sort of funky film that felt a little bit more foreign in a sense by a Mexican director, and how much part of it is I think that, you know, a critic in Birdman comes off so horribly that I think a lot of critics were generally turned off by the movie. So if people love that movie and decide that, you know, Michael Keaton really did something amazing in it, you know, that could change. But I do think that, you know, not to get into it too much, but there's not a sense that there's a giant groundswell of goodwill around Michael Keaton. And, you know, as people have said, there's a reason why you haven't seen him in that many movies in the last 20 years, and it's not that he's not a great actor.
I saw that in his Charlie Rose interview on PBS. Actually, you know, we're all sympathetic to his life story. Certainly, the Oscar voters should be. They're in the industry. They've all had dry spells and long periods where they were on the outside, and now he gets this triumphant comeback career-wise in a movie that kind of mirrors his own life story. But he's not being warm and fuzzy, to your point. Even when Charlie Rose was asking him about, oh, this is your life, he was kind of giving him the walk-up to a kind of warm, fuzzy answer. He was cynical and poo-pooing and dismissive. You know, Eddie Redmayne, on the other hand, as you're saying, yeah, he's at these industry events. He's warm and charming. He's so next to you. What did you think of the film? And, you know, now Keaton has been making a movie up till now, and now he's hitting the campaign trail, I hear, so we'll finally see him. But I don't think he can be warm and charming. Hey, I've got another conspiracy theory for you, right? Or another thing, if somebody wants to take Eddie down, why is it that none of us are talking about, I think it's his weakest point, which is, if he wins an Oscar, does Stephen Hawking win too? You know, think about it. The voice we hear from that squawk box is actually Hawking. He took the script, right, and he recited the dialogue. Now, so does that mean he's performing that role? I mean, we got to ask this question, Academy, if you're watching. Does this get to be a shared award? I mean, it's like The Exorcist with Linda Blair, with Mercedes McCambridge as the devil coming out of her, right? There was a big controversy that year. Did they have to share it? So they decided, well, we're not giving it to Linda Blair who had won the Globe. But they said, because we can't get into this whole So where do you come down on that? Does Hawking deserve an Oscar too?
That's an interesting question. I mean, you know, are you going to give it to the guy who designed the program, the voice box machine as well? I will say that I heard, again, as people are trying out their semi-dubious at this early stage opposition angle, somebody said to me, well, here's the thing about Eddie Redmayne. I mean, you know, he acts for the first third of the movie, and then he just sits in a chair.
Letting Hawking do the voices, right. It's true.
I don't really think that point of view is going to gain too much traction, and I do think that as you watch it viscerally, you think to yourself, wow, look at him, the way that he, you know, is contorting himself, the research he must have done into this condition, into Stephen Hawking. He must have watched a lot of film. Like, it's very, very compelling and convincing without necessarily falling into straight imitation. But I mean, you know, he very, very fully embodies Stephen Hawking. I think, you know, people love Oscar loves a good biopic performance too. So, you know, I think that I don't know. I think he's got a pretty good chance, personally.
No, I think he's going to win too, because of the other factor you mentioned before too, and that is that the kind of the movie's got to lift you up emotionally, and this movie does, especially the music score is transporting in this, and they use it very effectively to tell his story. And at the end, when they do the whole flashback sequence and the rest of it, it just stirs you as you watch this, so that you walk out of there absolutely charged up emotionally, which is kind of a lie. I mean, I don't think we've seen such a whitewashing of a life story since maybe A Beautiful Mind. You know, nobody in this movie has a single fault. Nobody has a single fault. And then at the end, when he dumps her, spoiler alert, right, She doesn't go, you son of a bitch, I've wiped your butt, I've done all these things to the wheelchair, I've stuck with you through this ordeal of a marriage. No, what's her response? I hope I have served you well. She drops to one knee. I mean, even the breakup is handled nobly, and everybody's good. It's just classic Hollywood. You know what? Yeah. It's okay. They were optioning her book. They needed
exactly.
approval. They're not going to get it unless it's that. And sometimes the audience even wants that. So
well, I think the audience probably does want that, and the insurance that they have, you'd have to be pretty churlish to come out and say, you know, Stephen Hawking's first wife totally whitewashed this whole story. Even if she did, it's like she definitely paid her dues and put in her time. But it is true that, you know, we had a story that the magazine published about 10 years ago about the next marriage to the nurse that you see. She's kind of, you get a few signals that there's problems with this lady, the kind of saucy redhead who takes over. But actually there were all kinds of really disturbing abuse allegations against her. And things in Stephen Hawking's world got a lot darker right after the credits rolled on this period of his life. So
wow.
There's definitely a lot more interesting stuff there.
Wow. I didn't know that. I'll have to check out this article.
Judy Bacharach, yeah, it's on VF.com.
Okay. Benedict Cumberbatch just pulled off an upset at the Emmys. Can he do it here? There's a lot of love for this movie. Pete Hammond is saying an Invitations Game's going to win Best Picture, and that we're all underestimating it and we're all fools. If so, you know, we know he's beloved in the industry. He's got the highest cool factor. You run a website, put Benedict Cumberbatch in a headline, and watch Google go crazy, right, in terms of the number of hits.
Yeah, no, there's no question that Cumberbatch has a gigantic legion of adoring fans, and you know, and my initial early sort of thought, like, oh, maybe that's annoying in Hollywood. I don't think it is. I think people have goodwill toward him. He's paid his dues and been in a lot of movies, and is also a nice guy and a pro. And yeah, I mean, it's true. Imitation Game is definitely a real threat, not least because the Weinstein Company is there steering the ship. Basically, you know, it's very hard to figure out this year in terms of Best Picture, and I have been resisting the urge to put Boyhood at the top for a long time, just because I love it so much. I don't want to be disappointed that it didn't win, and disappointed that my prediction was wrong. I was going to go for one or the other, but it is a very strange, arty movie that is 3 hours long and beautiful. But even Ethan Hawke acknowledges it's 12 years of scenes that would have been cut from any other movie. And then Selma, which I personally adored. I know you weren't as enthusiastic about. I think it's a great movie, but I haven't seen the kind of traction yet, although it was encouraging to see how it fared at the Globes. Birdman is a strange, very good, but I don't think 100% successful at what it's trying to pull off movie. And then, like, the next one that's in there is Grand Budapest Hotel, which nobody thought was even going to figure into anything. I kept holding out hope just because it's such a great movie. I saw it twice and I love it. But I think Imitation Game, if we leave the Weinstein Company an opening, they will probably take it. and unless something really gains some traction, it seemed to me, the reason why I did put Boyhood finally in the top is that it does seem to have a lot of momentum right now. It just seems one awards ceremony after another, or nomination announcement after another, Boyhood is there leading the pack or close to the top of the pack. It's starting to actually feel like Boyhood's year. But I don't know, that could change too.
But Birdman's going to have the most nominations. Traditionally, historically, the movie with the most nominations wins Best Picture. The problem with the Birdman theory is it's so kooky, quirky, there is no precedent of another movie winning that bizarre. Now, of course, the old precedents don't matter at all at the Oscars anymore. Ever since really the past 15 years or so, weird stuff wins all the time, like The Hurt Locker or No Country for Old Men, and we keep thinking we're looking for the old pattern of the British epic, The English Patient, or Out of Africa winning, and those days are gone. You and I have a hard job now trying to predict, and Boyhood does not fit any of these patterns either. It's only going to have maximum 6 nominations. Only 2 movies in the past 20 years have had 6 or less nominations and have won. Crash had 6. The Departed had 5. So, I mean, if you're trying to look in the tea leaves of how this could all play, I think it comes down to momentum, though, as you were saying. I think that once the bandwagon takes off, people jump on. And I once asked an Academy member, I don't get it. You know, you guys consider yourself to be the most maverick, independent, smug people. No one's going to tell you what to do. But the minute the Precursor Awards all line up and say that Jennifer Lawrence is going to win Best Actress for Silver Lining Playbook, you guys follow along. Why is that? Yeah. And her answer was boldly honest, and I'm sure true. She said, I want to be on the winning team. Yeah. And so that's it. So Boyhood's taken off. They're just going to get on the bandwagon, right?
Yeah, I think it is really starting to feel like Boyhood's year, and I guess it has felt that way for a while. I really did, again, just resist because I was just so... I really loved the movie a lot. I need to see it again. I only saw it once at South by Southwest. But I think it really is something, and to me, oddly, I don't know how much the Oscar voters care about New York Times, but I have a sneaking suspicion they do pay attention to that. And all three New York Times critics just lavish praise on Boyhood. I can't remember, it was A.O. Scott said favorite movie in 20 years. I mean, these guys were seriously, you know, bowing down to it, and I do think that has weight. I think the Oscars, the Academy does want to have, you know, artistic credibility in addition to kind of being a convention for the industry. And this film, it's just really getting hard to turn away from the idea that it's anything other than an absolutely extraordinary film accomplishment that needs to get to get honored. So I hope that holds. You know, I would love to see some real recognition for Selma, but I think that's going to happen in the form of a bunch of nominations, hopefully, and Ava will be in there for nominated for director. At this point, how do you not give Best Director to Richard Linklater after just holding this thing together for 12 years?
But I want to correct a vicious rumor that's been making its way across cyberspace here, and you alluded to it a minute ago, Mike, which is the fact that I don't like Selma, right? What happened was I was here in New York for the screening where, and you may have been there too, where Ava was there. It was the first New York presentation of the thing, and she was so effective and so magnetic and charming. She kept coming out and standing ovation and standing ovation and standing ovation. Well, I had recorded the Q&A on my iPhone, right? So during the 99th standing ovation, at the end, I sat down and I'm going through my iPhone to make sure I have the recording right. And afterwards, I just heard from everyone, Tom O'Neill sat down when did not stand up with everyone else at Selma. And some bloggers took pictures of it, and it was like, oh, come on! I missed one standing ovation. I got all this grief, but no, I liked Selma too.
Yeah, but I mean, also, I don't know. There might have been another one of those things that I was at, and I was there with a bunch of film blogger geeks like myself, and none of us were standing during the standing ovations, just out of sort of professional, you don't stand. It's like we're journalists. We're supposed to be objective. So I thought you had told me that you had an issue with the second act or something like that.
Well, I think yes, I'm sure I did tell you. The first half of it, of course, is kind of routine, but then it takes off as a movie. No, that's probably true, but it's still it's an accomplishment. She's, of course, a real winner. Let's wrap up here quickly with supporting actor. Nobody can beat J.K. Simmons, can they?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that I think it's one of those things. It's kind of like you're saying about Jennifer Lawrence a couple years ago, or certainly like Les Miserables. Come on, Anne Hathaway. It's just there's so much momentum behind him that it's just absurd to talk about anybody else. Now I'm trying to look here. Okay, Edward Norton is really, really good in Birdman, and Ethan Hawke is really, really good in Boyhood, and Mark Ruffalo is really, really good in Foxcatcher. So I'm not sure that but I guess in a weird way, it's such a big, robust, fun, crazy, over-the-top role. It's an actor's dream. And J.K. Simmons, it's just such a great story. This guy who's been in a million things, from playing Peter Parker's boss to the whatever commercials he was doing for all those years. For him to really sink his teeth into a thing like this and crush it like that, I think everybody's just going to want to see him up there, smiling from ear to ear. So I'm happy for him and excited for that.
And winking. Here's my theory on all of this, and that is there's a new pattern we've seen only recently at the Oscars. They didn't used to go for villains, right? Only rarely would a Kathy Bates win or an Anthony Hopkins. But now in recent years we've seen in this category this stampede of I call them winking devils in this race, right? Javier Bardem, No Country for Old Men, Christoph Waltz twice, Heath Ledger, right? So all of a sudden, what we're doing is we're getting this sneaky look inside the dark heart of Hollywood, where they're telling us, and J.K. Simmons is a great winking devil. I mean, this guy is so evil. You're rooting for him the whole time. He's great.
Yeah, and I think villains that's some of the best acting, right? Those are always the best characters. That's the best acting. If you can really make a villain somebody irresistible, and he absolutely does that. It's so funny because I liked that film a lot, and then on further reflection, it sort of breaks down and is probably pretty absurd. But it really works when you're in the theater, in the dark room with the flickering images on a screen.
Yeah, and it's my favorite surprise movie of the year, and a lot of other people's too.
Do you think it will get? I have a question for you. Do you think it will get nominated for Best Picture?
Yes. I think because of the preferential ballot, I think it has enough people with enough passion. Remember, you just need 5% of the vote in a high-ranking category to get in, and I think it has that. The one Sony Pictures classic movie I think is in trouble there is Foxcatcher. I think Whiplash actually has better of a chance than Fox.
What the heck happened to Foxcatcher? Can you explain that to me?
I don't know. It certainly picked up lots of plaudits over at Cannes, and then it just didn't. I think one of the problems with the movie is it doesn't peak properly. Certainly, Steve Carell doesn't even have a scene where he's emotional at all in the whole movie. He's just doing a really good job with that role. But
when we've been talking for a while about, I saw the Cannes premiere of it, so I was as in the bag for Foxcatcher as you could possibly be. I'll be completely honest about that. Went to the party afterwards, that's the way to see it, and to me it was a really towering achievement. But if you think about people with a screener, and the sun's shining outside and you're in Bel Air or whatever, and you put this thing on and it's drizzling for 40 minutes and there's no Steve Carell for 45 minutes, at some point it's a problem, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if Boyhood wins Best Picture, we know that voters like to give the Best Picture an acting award almost always. At least 70% of the time, Best Picture wins an acting award. Patricia Arquette was so smart to dip down to supporting because she would have had trouble in the lead race. But arguably, people say this movie could have been called Motherhood. It's got such a strong female presence, and certainly there's nobody with a lead female role over her, but she shrewdly and humbly dipped down to supporting, and I think thereby locks in this prize, don't you?
Yeah, and yes, absolutely, and I sure hope so, and that was my feeling walking out of it, of course, like a big Oscar nerd that I am, 5 seconds after seeing it in March. I thought Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette are the only, I really thought were the only hope it was going to have for any Oscar treatment at all, just because it seemed like such a strange and different film. So again, I'm thrilled to see this momentum building behind it. But the fact that momentum is built behind her is great. And if anybody tried to give it to Meryl Streep at this point, that would be very sad. Meryl Streep's very good in Into the Woods. That's a fun movie. But Patricia Arquette does something absolutely astonishing in this film. You mentioned humble in terms of dropping down a category, but how about humble letting yourself age without any real effort to hide any of what that does to your body as a woman in middle age over the course of 12 years on screen, and just being this emotionally raw and vulnerable. And, I don't know. I mean, I just think it's an absolutely incredible accomplishment that she did, and it would be one of the most deserved Oscars ever, even if maybe it could have been in a lead role.
That's how she won her Emmy, by the way. I'm sure you know that Emmys are bestowed based on one sample episode submitted to the jury, and the year she pulled off an upset for drama actors for Medium, it was, to use your words, raw and vulnerable performance. She walks around in this episode in floppy slippers and an old house coat kind of thing, and she just looks like hell. And you really, as a viewer, buy into this woman's inner torture and mundane life, so much so that the empathy is overwhelming. And I forget who she beat. She beat Jessica Alba. I mean, she beat some major figures.
Yeah, and by the way, like I do want to say, you know, she's an incredibly beautiful woman, and her looking like hell is like, you know, most people on their best day ever. So, you know, not to overdo the thing, but just the fact that, you know, there's a lot of typical Hollywood narcissism and ego, or whatever you want to call it, that would have prevented a performance that's this believable from beginning to end. And that clearly never played into it for her. Or if it did, they managed to make it not visible at all on the screen. So, you know, she really is. I love that the character is just called Mom, and that's so real to me as a kid who grew up with a mom. And it's not till much later that you realize that this person has their own life that isn't in relation to you, and she kind of just played that, and she really did a beautiful job. That's another reason why, in a weird way, supporting makes sense to me, because she is literally supporting that boy throughout the whole movie.
Yeah. Okay, on that note, I think you're going to have a good Oscars, Mike. You're rooting for the movie that's going to win Best Picture. That doesn't often happen in our line of work, does it?
Yeah, I know it does. That's very exciting.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. We'll pick this up later on.
Thank you so much, Tom. Bye.